Okay, I'm Michael Warren. I was born in Astley-Bridge. In fact, I was born at 32 Maxwell Street and I lived there till I was 20. I want to tell you about my father first. My father was born in 1906, so my father was in his 40s when I was born.
Wow.
He lived just near All Souls Church, and when I say he lived near All Souls Church, he lived in Rick Street for a time, I do know that. And he used to go to Wolfenden Street School. When I asked him about when did he leave school, he actually started work when he was 11. So he worked part-time and went to school part-time from the age of 11. And his job was a little piecer. And when I asked him about what he did, he said he had to crawl in the machines and piece the cotton up. So it sounds like a really dangerous job. Well, as I say, he worked as a little piecer. And I've seen pictures of little piecers, and they had no protective clothing at all. And they worked in the bare feet, so they were crawling out of machines. And he also said, not only he wasn't on his own, like 20% of the workforce were children. And when the Act came in to prevent all this, the cotton mills had a lot of problems replacing all these children who did all this work. And my memories of the cotton industry, I lived in Astley-Bridge, the memories of the cotton industry, I think of Blackburn Road, where Asda is now. It's sort of wide open. I remember Eskett's Mill being there and towering over the road, and it was always in darkness with the shadow of the mill. It was almost like walking through a tunnel, which is really a main road now. I was coming past there, I'd be about 6 or 7 year old, and the buzzer went, or the hooter went for the mill, and everybody poured out the mill. And I noticed they were all in blue overalls. They all took their overalls on, and they had bits of cotton stuck all over their clothes and in their hair. And I never thought anything of it. It just seemed the normal thing. And it's funny, now I'm in an industry where I look after people's welfare in industry, advising them on respiratory protection, that they must have been breathing in all this cotton and so on. And it was, my dad had broken fingers where he trapped his fingers in machines, and one of his fingers were bent, and that was from an injury in a cotton mill. But health and safety I don't think existed, so that's how it was. As I said, I was born at 32 Maxwell Street. I was actually born in the house in 32 Maxwell Street in 1949. And I went to the school around the corner, which was a Catholic school. My mother was a strong Catholic. She came from my ancestors on my mother's side were all Irish. But the Catholic school seemed normal at the time, but it seems a bit odd now when I think back of how we were treated, because every other lesson seemed to be about religion. We'd started off in the morning with stories about religion and so on.
What was the school called?
Holy Infants. And it seems a bit odd now, but we used to have whip walks in those days. So there was a big organisation to have whip walks, and you'd turn up in the town centre, you'd have these processions, and there were thousands of people watching and thousands of people going round on these walks. You'd be organised almost like a military parade. And we were told it was to show the strength of the Catholic Church. The funny things about the church I found was there was Mass on Sundays, and Masses were 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock. And on Monday morning, when you went into school, you had to they called out a register to check that you went to church. So everybody used to say 9 o'clock church, And then if you had communion as well, you'd say 9 o'clock mass, Holy Communion as well. I always enjoyed playing football, so I rarely went to church. So when I used to go into church, when I used to go into school on the Monday, and they called out the register, they'd say, Warren, and I'd say, oh well, it's 11 o'clock mass, and they'd look at me. But I lied every time, because I know that none of the children in there went to 11 o'clock, so nobody could say, well, I didn't see him. But children were encouraged to actually split on your friends if you found out they said they were going, and so on.
Which church did you go to?
All Infants Church. It's next door to it's in Baxendale Street. And the priest was always coming in. So he'd come in unannounced and the lesson would stop and he'd tell you something about the Bible, stories or things like that. But not so much the priest, but the teachers used to tell me that there's only one religion and that's the Catholic religion. And they advised us not to bother with Protestant children at all. And in fact, I remember one teacher telling us a story about the Jews. And he said, the Jews are just, they've not got it right at all because they're still waiting for the Saviour. We've had our Saviour and that's Jesus Christ. When I started work in engineering. I was told if I became a fitter in mechanical engineering, there'd be a job for life. They will always need fitters, and we're talking now about early 1960s, and they said when they automate everything, they'll still need fitters, so a fitter was a good job to have. It wasn't true, because by the time I was in my 30s, fitters really not needed anymore. But in those days in Bolton, there was a lot of engineering. You could pick up the evening news and there'd be 2 columns of jobs. So there was lots of jobs. And you could literally, on a Saturday morning, knock on a door in an engineering company. They'd take you in, they'd show you around, and they'd offer you a job. And there was no filling in forms or anything like that. You'd shake hands on it and you could start a new job the week on Monday. So it was easy to transfer from one job to the other. And even in the 1970s, I was leaving one job for another just for another £2 a week. My wage then, in the 1970s, was £26 a week, which was good in those days. Going back to my apprenticeship, it seems like a lot of training and you had for 5 years, but really you were cheap labour, and so you had to. So an apprenticeship then, you'd start before you were 16. In those days, by the time you were 16, you'd missed it. It was too late, and you couldn't get an apprenticeship, so you had to start at 15. It changed since, of course, but an apprenticeship was 5 years. And that would partly be, you'd be in production, but partly you'd be working with somebody who'd show you what to do in great detail. So you'd had certain jobs to do. And at the time you thought these jobs were worthless, that you worked hard on filing something in a vice all day and producing a precision item by hand, and you'd measure this and square it up, and it would take you all day to do some things, but you eventually become very skillful at this, and you learned a lot. However, there wasn't much investment in engineering in those days, so we were working on old machines. In fact, one machine I worked on, I was told that it made shells, or machine part of the shells, in the First World War, and it was still being used in the 1960s. And we were told that in other countries, particularly America, that all the machines were really modern. And I can't remember any new machines in the factory where I worked, and that was in Church Wharf in Bolton. And there wasn't much in the way of health and safety. I know people who got injured and trapped in machines, and people got killed. But it just went on, and that was it. So I was a bit disappointed with the lack of investment, I suppose. We didn't feel, and even on the shop floor, you didn't feel that it was going to go anywhere. And eventually it all collapsed. But the origin of the engineering in Bolton was based on supplying to the cotton industry. And when the cotton industry disappeared, all these companies diversified in other directions. So I had a job. One of the first jobs I had was an apprentice welder. And so I had this job, and they said, if you do the job, and we used to work 46 hours a week when I was 15, but then they said, you'll have to go to night school, and that would have been 3 nights a week. So if I'd have kept with that job, I was working 46 hours. They wanted me to work overtime as well, and it meant that I worked till 6:30 or 7 o'clock, and then the college was not far off, so I could run to the college and carry on at night school. So I'd study theory in the college until probably 9:30, and then I'd be starting again 7:30 in the morning. So I didn't think it was a great idea. So I got another job at Jackson's in Bolton, where I could get day release. And day release meant I worked 4 days and I got a day off to go to college. And the college would report back to the company to tell them whether I went in or didn't. But I learned a lot. In fact, when I think back, I learned more at college than I did in all my time at school. And I found there was lots of things that school didn't get to. It was before calculators, so we could do logarithms and equations. So I learnt a lot about things, and in my present job now, they talk about transferring skills. I think the fitting job, which became redundant, it has helped me now to develop my skills into what I do now. And I teach people. I go around to companies and do training courses. I write training courses and I write books on the subject. But I don't think I could have done that without the apprenticeship. The apprenticeship was so important. The union was important because you had a blue card from the union, so you paid your union once a fortnight, and you had a blue card, and then when you became 21, and that was the time you finished your apprenticeship, you got a green card from the union, and the green card was really this. It was a book with all the payments in that you made, but the green card was really the certificate. And a lot of jobs just later than that, unless you had a green card, the union card, you couldn't get a job. And I've mentioned that we all felt there was no. You were always struggling for equipment. There was never the right equipment, and you had to make do and mend with everything. And I used to have a little poem stuck on the wall above my bench. I know management looked at it a few times and scowled at me. And it was called We the Willing, and it said, we the willing, led by the unknowing, doing the impossible for the ungrateful, have for so long done so much with so little, and now qualified to do anything with nothing. I lived in Maxwell Street, which was just around the corner from the Bell Cinema. The Bell Cinema, they had films on, but they didn't seem to have modern films on. It was always a few years old by the time you saw a film. And in fact, I got up one morning to go to school, so that would have been primary school, and my mother said, just in passing, the Bell Cinema's burnt down. And it was 200 yards from the house. So it was, and I said, oh, has it? And so I don't think I lost any sleep over it. But I remember going to the cinema on Saturday afternoons, and my brother used to take me, and we'd see his friends there, and we'd watch various films that were on there. And the Bell Cinema was okay. And when I say okay, my mother didn't want me to go to some other cinemas because there was you'd get fleas or there were rats in the cinema. And I remember going to the Carlton once, and I was sat down watching a film, and I felt a rat brush against my feet as I was watching the film. And I don't know why, I didn't seem to bother about it, but that's what happened. The Bell Cinema, I remember Flash Gordon, I remember the Three Daredevils of the Red Circle. These were all American, and then Superman, I think, was on as well. But there was a Mr. Prendergast who was the manager, and people walking up and down, you would queue to get in, and there were people walking up and down the queue to make sure you weren't getting out of order in any way. And so you all queued up and went in, but I remember seeing where the photographer was, if you like, or this cinematographer, that the beam that came out and shone to the screen, everybody was smoking in there. And it's amazing how the light got through to the screen, because you could see all the smoke in the atmosphere. So it must have been a really unhealthy place to be when you think of fleas, rats and all the smoke, but that's what happened. But yeah, the last film that was on there, the cinema, was Dirk Bogarde in Doctor in the House. So that's how long ago that was. That'd be the late 1950s, I suspect. Well, if you're coming out of Bolton over towards Preston on the Belmont Road, you'd come to Belmont Village. There's a bleach works there. It's closed down now, but they use the buildings as works units, and they rent them out. And my uncle worked there, and I remember, when I fit all the story together, that I was coming home for lunch from school. So this is in the late 1950s, and there's an ambulance. I could hear the ambulance coming down Belmont Road, and I didn't think anything of it. But that night, my mother got the paper, because things got in the paper very quickly. I think it was the same day. And she said, my uncle's got killed, and he got killed at the bleach works. Now, you hear stories through the family of what's happened, and he bought his wife a clock for her birthday, and he got killed that day. And when they opened his locker to clear his stuff out, they found the clock in there. And when she said, what about compensation for this? And said, well, the point is, you see, he was working at a time when he shouldn't have been working. He was behind on his work, and so he's working through his lunchtime to catch up. And he got killed so he didn't get killed in work time. So there was no compensation. So, and I thought this was unfair at the time. When I think back, it's really unfair. But that was the case. Now, my brother worked at the bleach works much later. When I think about it, why did my mother let him go there? But he worked at the bleach works. And he used to play football at lunchtime. We all played football. So he used to play football at lunchtime, and the ball went on the roof. And he went up to get it and fell through the roof. And he fell 20 foot down onto a concrete floor. And he just had some cuts and bruises. And but I remember that. I remember that he went into work one day, and he made it to work, and it was heavy with snow, so there was no transport running. So he walked from Astley Bridge to Belmont Bleach Works, and he was one of the few people who got in that day. And as a gesture of goodwill, the manager gave him a present each for the people who got in, and he got a little glass ashtray which had a map of the bleach works on it.